if you're familiar with our platform, you know one of the things that made us wildly successful and wildly popular is that we don't waste any time with small talk. We're not really interested in too much backstories or motivation or inspiration. It's just information. That's most important. And how can you make money is even more important. So in true Market Mondays fashion, we're not going to waste any time. We're going to get to it. We're going to go through a variety of different trending topics that I'm sure everybody's interested in. And, just to try to provide as much information as possible. So you guys ready?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Yes. So let's do it. So, Ian.
Yes.
I want to start. I got a lot of specific questions, but I want to start broad range. The state of the market right now.
Yes.
It's been a roller coaster year. Very, very bad year, but the last couple of weeks it's kind of been up and down. One day it's up. Today it was up. Tomorrow it might be down. You don't know what to expect. So we have a lot of new investors that came into the space during Corona, and they made a lot of money. They were doing options. They were day trading.
Dogecoin.
Everybody was a stock market and investing genius. And now, we entered bear market territory, and now people are panicking. People are saying the game is rigged.
Yeah.
This isn't for me. I don't trust the stock market. So what's your thoughts on the current state of the market, and what would your advice be for people that are nervous during this time?
My advice is very simple. It comes down to three things. The market is rigged to stay up if you invest in good quality assets. So I know you guys have heard me say this before, but you need to hold for minimum of 5-year period, ideally 30. Stay away from any risky assets. So I'm sorry, Dogecoin was good for a few months, and then it went back to the actual value of where it was. So if you are a new investor or this is your first recession, you have to hold for the long term. Because if you talk to anyone here and say, hey, what do you wish you did in 2008 and 2009? The answer is always, I wish I took every dollar I had and poured it into the market. It's not going to be any different this time. Invest in index funds, high-quality ETFs for a long period of time, and a couple quality companies outside of that like tech and healthcare we'll talk about later, and you'll be good. You should not be afraid to invest, because if you look, especially over a 30-year period, you have a 99.98% chance of being profitable if you're holding for a 30-year period.
I think what Ian said is 100% correct. And just to add to it, it's like when in 2008, when we saw the market crash, obviously during the real estate collapse, we all thought to ourselves, I wish we had capital to invest. And so when we look at times like this in the bear market, it's like, all right, well, this is another opportunity for us to invest. And so when people ask, should I be invested now? Yeah, there's no way to time it, but if we keep this in long term, the appreciation on what we're going to put into it is going to be more than we had when we started. And so we always try to stress to people, like you said, the indexes. We walked down this, this walkway, and within maybe 5 minutes, there was about 10 people talking to us about ETFs, talking about indexes. And so the mindset is there. We just have to spread it more. And so that people can understand, it's cool to have a tech company like Apple, but if you just invest in one, you're leaving yourself open for some more risk. And so the volatility that happens with a stock like Tesla, obviously Apple's not as volatile, but having that, it could lead your portfolio to be up and down. And so we always try to stress to people, have indexes, have ETFs, and if you want to, maybe you have your two tech. So yeah, man, I think it's a great time, right? We always try to say, like, what's the perfect time? The perfect time is when you have enough education behind you to make educated decisions with your money. And if we're being perfectly honest, the crash hasn't been as bad as it could have been. And when I'm looking at the S&P future, we should end up 4,500, 4,600 for the year. So it could have been a lot worse. It's a huge mistake not to invest and try and time the market. Yeah, and sometimes you just got to go through things, right? Like, there's so much to be learned. I remember in 2008 going through that process and selling my shares of companies that I don't even want to mention because it's so embarrassing to say now, but I had to learn these things, right? Like, sometimes you have to go through a bullish run, you have to go through a bearish run to really understand who you are as an investor, how you're going to create your strategy, what your plan's going to be. And so, like, I look at this time, right? If 2020 was that time when everybody put their money in and made some sound investments, I mean, everything was going up, right? And now we're in a bear market. Well, what are you learning during this time, right? Because what you learn now will, 5, 10 years, those lessons you'll be able to implement. And now when you see the cycle, it's like, oh, I know this. Like, we've seen this before. And so a lot of people, this is their first time seeing something like this. And so I can get the apprehension, like, oh my gosh, I put my money in, it's gone. Yeah, but let's go through a whole process. Let's go through a whole run and see where we're at in 5 years. See where we're at in 10 years. And when we look back, we'll say, okay, this is what I've learned, this is what I'm implementing now.
Has anyone in here wished that they invested more in 2007 and 2008?
Oh my gosh.
By show of hands.
Oh,
now here's the thing. Living through this crisis now will prepare you for the next one if it happens in 2027 or 2030. The fear that came in 2020 initially when the market fell and even now, everything I went through in 2008 helped me tremendously. So if you begin to invest now, when that next opportunity comes, or if we have a global recession, you will be a lot better off and have a strategy in place to know what to do when it does emerge.
So let me ask you this. What is one sector that all of us are looking to invest in over the next year, next 5 years, let's say, that is essentially inflation-proof and recession-proof?
For me, absolutely, healthcare, and a company that I love the most is Eli Lilly. Eli Lilly, kind of like his Tim Duncan, incredibly reliable, but it's not the sexy company. It's not Tesla. It's not AMD. It's not NVIDIA, but it's incredibly reliable. So even through the crash, they did incredibly well. They are doing well now. They're up 5x over the last 6 years. And even though there are some other companies that may get a lot more attention in the media, the returns on Lilly have been safe. It's one of those stocks that you can invest in, put your money into, go to sleep, and you're never worrying about if there's a huge scandal with the CEO of Lilly or if their products are not going to be effective and useful. So healthcare is the space I'm looking in, and the company I love there for sure is Lilly.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think healthcare is one of those things that when we look at recessions, right, there's something that's going to be stable. People are always going to get sick.
Yes.
People are always going to need medicine. People are always going to need treatment. And so if you know that, no matter what the economic climate, healthcare makes an obvious choice, right? You said about Lilly, but I think companies like CVS, obviously Pfizer, what we saw during the pandemic, Walgreens, these places where you're going to get your medication from make perfect sense in a type of recession. But I also like agriculture, right? Because another thing that's going to happen during a recession is we all have to eat, right? We're all going to have to find a place to get something to eat. And so stable companies like Kellogg's or stable companies like Procter & Gamble, these companies will be here. Campbell Soup is another one. It's kind of boring, but in times of recession, people are going to buy these things, right? Because they can be stored for a while and they're going to be used. So even in agriculture itself, again, we can look at ETFs. There's ETFs for all these commodities. Corn has an ETF. And so we're looking at the process of like, all right, well, what is something that is a necessity? All right, well, we're going to need healthcare. That's a necessity. Food is a necessity. So if we look at companies in these sectors, yeah, they're going to be recession-proof because they're going to be here no matter what.
But why are the companies that are safe deemed boring? Because like only companies that are not sensational need sensational marketing to get a sensational gain. Like notice Campbell's, Stryker, Eli Lilly, they don't need a really salacious rollout plan or a marketing campaign, or they're spamming on Instagram to get influence and growth in the market. So I think we have to reframe boring to safety and guarantee wealth.
I feel like it's just not sexy, right? Everybody wants a Lamborghini, but the number one sold car is a Toyota Camry. They both do the same thing, right? So like when you think of these products, these are steady, right? They don't have the same growth potential, right? But they also don't have the same downside potential. When we're talking about safety inside of a recession, you want to make sure that you have balance. And so it may not have great growth and great value, but it's steady. And so if we're looking for something to put our money in that's steady, those are two sectors for sure, no matter what the economic term of the country is in, those sectors will be all right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a big difference between a Toyota Camry and a Lamborghini, though.
No, I'm just saying.
I'm not sure if they do the same thing.
They do the same thing.
They get you from point A to point B.
Right, they get you, right? So
theoretically. Yeah, but they don't do the same thing.
All right, so what do they do different? What do they do differently?
Oh, they do a lot of things differently.
Such as?
This
sounds like Dogecoin versus VOO.
Right, don't they get you to point A to point B with four wheels? It's going to look a lot different.
It's going to feel a lot different.
Yes.
Well, that's true too, but it's still going to do the job, right? The Camry going to do the job. Lamborghini going to cost you more. It might be a bigger liability, right? So the Camry going to do the job for you. The Honda going to do the job for you.
With less drawdown.
With less drawdown.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting. That's one way to look at it. But you know, we was all talking to a gentleman the other day, and very insightful conversation. And he was telling us that in business, he always wants to be in a seller's market, and he never wants to be in a buyer's market. And you know, I'm like, well, what do you mean? He's like, let me explain a little further for you. He's like, that you can understand, because he's actually from UK. He's from Nigeria originally, but he lives in the UK. So he was giving me examples that was out of the country, and it wasn't really relating. So he was like, when you go to the petroleum station, which is gas, the gas station, he's like, have you ever seen anybody negotiate gas prices at the gas station? Never seen it before, right? That's a seller's market. No matter what the gas prices are, you can complain about it, but you're gonna pay it, or you're not gonna be able to drive. Whereas a buyer's market is like a flea market. And you go and you see a painting, and the painting's $100, and you say, I got 50, and then you argue with the guy, and then you settle on 75. That's a buyer's market, right? Yeah. So he brought up an interesting point because he was like, the light bill. That's a seller's market. You can't negotiate your light bill. You either pay it or you cut your lights off, right? Gas. These are all things that the seller, and even luxury goods have become a seller's market. Rolex. Have you ever seen anybody negotiating the prices of a Rolex? You're lucky if you can get a Rolex. Right. It's a waiting list. The same thing with Louis Vuitton. You don't negotiate the prices of luxury bags. I say that to say, he was saying that he's not even a big fan of the stock market. He listed a whole bunch of things. But he said the two companies that he actually are in the seller's market are Apple and Microsoft. Yes. Yep. Where your cell phone has essentially become a life essential. It's almost impossible for a person to live without a cell phone these days. And Apple has pretty much a monopoly on not just the cell phone, but everything built around and the culture. More importantly, the culture. It's like Nike. Nike has established a culture, whereas you could put out Jordans and they're gonna sell out before they're actually released. Yeah. Kanye West has established a culture with Yeezy. Anything that he puts out, there's no negotiation. You're lucky if you get it, and if you don't get it, you're gonna pay 3 times more on the after sale. And Microsoft, similar situation where they're in the seller's market, right? So when Ian talks about 2 tech and 2 index, and it's like that fortress of Apple and Microsoft are the closest thing to being indestructible companies that we have currently. I ain't think it happen in the future, but currently, I think that if you're invested and you don't have Apple and Microsoft in your portfolio, you're doing yourself a tremendous disservice because literally 2 of the strongest companies in world history, and they both have established themselves as life essentials in a variety of different ways. So when I look at industries, of course, we talk about biotech, you talk about health, all of that stuff, the chip. But as far as companies that's essential, I don't see how you get past Microsoft and Apple for the next 5 to 10 years, or probably even longer than that.
Especially as long as Tim Cook is sitting in that seat. I mean, even if you look at the iTunes business, even AirPods, like the AirPod business alone is worth more than some electric vehicle companies that are not named Tesla. So if you just spun those out on those would be publicly traded companies. You have to realize like Apple has 40 or 50 great companies inside of one ecosystem. Right. And in your social life, let's be honest, if you text someone and a green bubble pops up, it's not looked at as favorably.
It's a red flag. It's actually a red flag.
Huge red flag. No disrespect
because
to anybody
I can't trust you.
We got some greens in here.
To all my Android users, I love you too.
It's hard to develop trust because you don't know if it got delivered.
Wait, you said it's trust issues?
You can't know if it got delivered. Like
Apple,
that's
a fact.
They do that on purpose.
Yeah.
If I know you saw it, so you chose not to respond.
Yes.
If it's green, because you can say anything, you never know.
Please, yeah.
There's too much wiggle room in that. Yeah. So Androids it's a very untrustworthy situation.
Kudos to Android.
Shout
we love you.
Shout out to Android.
Shout out to Samsung. If you want to sponsor the show, we could change our point.
Yes. Edit that, please.
We'll change our viewpoints.
We'll change our viewpoints.
And even with as big as podcasting has gotten, the term pod came from when you had to listen to podcasts on an iPod. AirPods. So when I'm listening to Compound and Friends and listening to Josh and Mike, listening to Earn Your Leisure, I'm listening through, like that podcast ecosystem was created by them. So if you just go through the actual supply chain of Apple, you literally have every great company that you could invest in or partner with in their ecosystem. Investing does not have to be really complicated. I think we make it complicated, but one of my favorite things to do is just to see, hey, what kind of phone do you have? If you have an iPhone, can you raise your hand?
Yeah, I see.
Matt, that's a great majority of the market share right there.
Yeah, and we spoke about this before, but that creates the competitive moat, right? That thing that separates you from the competition, right? That brand loyalty is probably one of the biggest competitive moats that they have. The fact that when we say the color green, people have a reaction is incredible. The fact that we use the word podcast and we subconsciously we know that's from an iPod, it's already ingrained in it, right? The trust factor that we feel when the 14 comes out, it's like, well, we have to have it. Well, I got the 13, but I need the newest one. And now they have packages now where it's like Apple One. You can get all the services if you just sign up, and now you can get a new phone every year. So they have this competitive moat with the brand loyalty in itself. Obviously, the products are outstanding. And like you said, there's at least 5 businesses inside that could be individual businesses, right? You got the wearables, the iPad itself, the MacBook, the phone, and now, when they get into healthcare, which will happen. When they get into healthcare, which will happen. Obviously, if you looked at the new Apple Watch that they have, you could just see slowly that it's turning into something that's bigger than just a watch. And I always question, well, where's the data going? Well, the data's going somewhere because they're going to use it for healthcare. But the next thing will be the glasses.
Yes.
The glasses will be the thing that will separate them from pretty much. I mean, they're already separated from everybody.
The car too.
Well, the car, that'll take them into the EV space.
But when that happens,
I think we're further away from the car. We're closer to the glasses, the wearables, because that's been something that they've been working on. And probably within the next, I think, 12 to 18 months, we're going to see them come to life.
If I was Fitbit CEO, I would be terrified. Anytime Apple gets into your market, they're going to take a bunch of market share, and already having a ravenous fan base. Kudos to Fitbit.
So even just doubling down on that seller's market and buyer's market, as an entrepreneur, when you're starting your business, it's always better to be in a buyer's market, in a seller's market, as opposed to a buyer's market. So I actually asked the gentleman that was having this conversation with us. I'm like, well, how do you go in a buyer's market and turn yourself into a seller's market? He said you can do it, but it's extremely difficult. It's almost impossible. Like Supreme has been able to do that. Kanye West has been able to do that. Where sneakers are a buyer's market, but he's turned it into a luxury brand where now it's a seller's market. Earn Your Leisure has been able to do that, where we've become luxury podcasting. But that's not normal, and it's extremely hard to do that. So, it probably would be easier to start at the seller's market, and when you're looking to invest, look in things that's essential, that's non-negotiable, that even when inflation goes up, the price is going to go up. Because the gentleman, he was in food, he has a farm. So he was saying that, he has a farm the size of Paris, to put it in perspective, literally. So he was saying that when inflation goes up, it doesn't really affect him, it affects the consumer. Because they're just going to raise the price. And it's not really negotiable because the product that he has is in almost a variety of a lot of different things that the world uses. So you really can't say we're not going to buy it from you. It's like OPEC. We're not really in a position to negotiate the prices of gasoline. So whenever they decide to raise the prices, it gets passed. It doesn't really hurt anybody except the consumer. So when you're looking to invest or when you're looking to start a business, these are things that's very important. You can reverse engineer it and do it the other way, but it's just more difficult. And it's a lower percentage that it's actually going to work. So let's talk about BRICS and how that will be one of the greatest threats to our economy in the next 20 years. So Brazil.
How many people know what BRICS is? Show of hands who know what BRICS is. Oh, see, we came to the right place. Josh, we appreciate this. This is the right place. Yeah, go ahead.
Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa.
Yep.
An alliance of sorts. So this is interesting for me on a variety of different reasons, but I want to get your opinions on it first. How will it affect, if it will affect, our economy?
One of my greatest fears is if we don't resolve this crisis between Russia and Ukraine, because of the troubled history that we've had with Russia, that Putin is going to use forces, and we're starting to see it now with the gas prices and a commodity war in Europe. I fear at some point through this formation of this super team that it could put some pressure on our economy. I think at some point we have to figure out how to resolve this crisis, but if you're looking through the lens of the European nations, and we're not even in winter yet, if the price of oil goes up, heating oil, I'm looking at the crude futures market, I'm looking at heating oil, natural gas, if those prices continue to rise, I'm worried about if that will cause a recession in Europe, and then that will extend over to the United States of America. I mean, we've had more than 2 negative quarters, and for the first time in history, they kind of reformatted what a recession was, right? So
they changed
the definition.
The definition's been changed.
So my fear is if we don't get some of these geopolitical issues under control, that it could lead to a contagion kind of level event that could spread to the United States. of America. But if you can't beat us, the superpower that we are, they're looking like, well, if we team up, could we potentially do things to get an edge over the American economy? And even Russia threatening to take the petrodollar away and now use the Chinese yuan to take that as payment. That is a little bit concerning. So I hope we get to fix those issues very soon so we can have some stability in the market and take any recession like fears away.
Yeah, I'll just add 2009, it wasn't even a BRICS. It was just BRIC. So South Africa wasn't even part of it. But I'll give you a statistic. When we talk about how will it affect the world, especially us, so 4 out of the 5 members, I'm excluding South African, are among the world's largest countries by population, area, and GDP. So let's just take Brazil, Russia, India, and China. About 23% of the gross world product comes from those countries combined. So almost 1/4 of the product of the world is coming from these countries. So can it affect us? Obviously. And the South Africa piece is so important, right? Because if you look at it, right, we think about Brazil, one of the largest economies in South Africa. South America. You got India with one of the largest populations in the world. China, one of the largest populations in the world. Yeah. They didn't have something on one continent, and they looked to the largest economy on the continent of Africa. They took South Africa. So now you've got just large populations with huge economies all coming together as one, right? So when you're talking like it's a team, this is like they're building their all-star team.
They're building
a super team as a country. It's like the Monstars trying to play Jordan. That's what this looks like and what it could potentially be. So 20 years, we definitely have to keep an eye on it. I mean, their population hasn't slowed down. Yeah,
because the estimate is by 2050 they could have a edge on us globally. And I'm sure politically there are going to be some things to make sure that doesn't happen, but we do have to, if we're doing a basic SWOT analysis, we do have to worry about that on the threats portion of the analysis of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like no different from schoolyard. If you can't beat a kid one-on-one, you jump him. So this is very similar to that, right?
We don't condone bullying.
No, we don't.
Yes.
No, please.
Equal opportunity fighters.
Please. Childhood bullying has reached levels of just extremely bad levels. But what I'm saying is that if you really look at this dynamic, North America and Europe obviously have a very close relationship. They've been like cousins since the beginning of this whole situation. So they said, okay, we'll just work around you. So you take the largest economy in South America, you take the largest economy in Africa, you take the 2 most populated countries in the world, and you take Russia. That's a formidable situation. And the thing about it, I feel like, superpower, I feel like in the next decade, a superpower, as we know it, won't be a superpower. Like, superpower is one country, how we know it right now. America's a superpower, China's a superpower, but it's hard to become a superpower. But it's easier to become a superpower when 5 countries come together, as opposed to one country just trying to climb up the ranks themselves. So that's just like teamwork, right? Yeah. So it's important, and it's important for Americans to have a more global point of view because we travel a lot, and America usually is not focused on outside of America. Like even when there was a whole water crisis, and we're doing like the ice bucket challenge, because it's hard to really have a perspective when you get so much media and so much stuff that's just really relevant to you. Yeah. Whereas in other parts of the world, they have more of a global perspective. Mm-hmm. It's dangerous to only have a domestic perspective because in the world that we live in, it's very flat. So everything is fluent. So when you're only focused on what's right in front of you, you're missing every single thing around you. So it's extremely important to understand the geopolitical landscape and the economic landscape of not just your state or your country, but the whole entire world. Because before you know it, if you don't, it's not only a threat to the economy, it's a threat to national security, it's a threat to everything. So I feel like it's not just up to the politicians or the people that's in power to have a point of view and to be knowledgeable on these things. It's important for every single person to be knowledgeable on these things. Like, this is extremely important for everybody, not just the people that's in position of power. So, yeah.
You're not a flat earther, right? Because you said the world is flat.
Not literally.
Okay. I want to clear that up.
Shout out to my guy, Kyrie Irving. Shout out to Kyrie Irving. I don't believe the earth is literally flat.
Okay.
It's a metaphor.
Got you.
All right, so let's talk about this. Your favorite company in the world, Meta, formerly known as Facebook, Shout out to the good
Hi, Mark
folks at Meta.
Zuckerberg. Alvin, I appreciate
Is it
you.
time for Facebook to find new leadership and find a new chief executive? Be careful how you answer this,
I
because
definitely will.
if your page gets shut down, if your Instagram, if you
I
get
just got
shadow
it back
banned,
up.
Disclaimer,
if you
disclaimer.
get shadow banned on Instagram, I can't help you.
The
Thank
thoughts shared by Ian Dunlap are his only.
And mine only. No, originally, some of you know my story, but I've been a fan of Facebook forever. I tried to convince my family, to get in the family and friends round on Facebook, and then all my family was like, "You want me to give you $125,000 to put into a dating app?" I'm like, "It's not a dating app. It's a social media network.
It actually is a dating app.
It's developed into
That's
that,
what
right?"
it's developed into. Yes.
So I remember the days when like the fanfare of back when it was Facebook was at a higher level and at a higher peak, and it was like at that point they were in the seller's market, like you had to be on Facebook. But now over the last few years, I think they're losing a little bit of edge, and I wouldn't say it's similar to the Apple situation when Scully took over because Steve was pushed out, but I do think Meta could use a new executive that has fresh eyes and let Zuckerberg be in the chairman seat, and then maybe that could revamp the company, because if I don't know many people on social media that are dying to be on Facebook, the product, or use Meta glasses, there's room and there's a lot of improvements that could be happening on IG. Like TikTok is like taking Instagram's lunch over the last couple of years. So I think at some point they will need to do an executive change in order to get some of that leadership and some of that market share back that they're currently losing. So I try to be political about it.
I think fresh eyes are important.
Yeah.
Right. If we can't figure out a way to make money outside of ad revenue, then
Which is a great model.
Which is a great model,
Yeah.
and until ad dollars start being spent the same way.
Yeah.
I think so. Fresh. I don't know if it's time to have a new CEO yet. I think.
You don't think so?
You know, the obviously their investment into the metaverse is going to take time.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, his focus right now has been that, and it's been very obvious. But this is a $50 billion, venture that's going to take 5 to 6 years. And so, do we have the patience enough to be with him through it? We'll see. Like I said, fresh eyes maybe as that's being built out to help with the ideas to generate revenue. Because, like you said, TikTok is taking some of the draw away from Instagram, but they still have WhatsApp.
Yeah.
Facebook is still. I mean, I don't want to offend it. It's still your grandparents' place to go, right? Right. Some of our parents.
Some of our parents. It's a platform for family.
It's a
Yes.
family platform.
Yes.
But it's like that. Like when once the older people get into it, kids are saying like, we don't
Yeah.
belong here anymore, right? And so like once parents get on Instagram, now it's like, no, we got to move to TikTok. And sooner or later, there'll be something else that like once adults get to TikTok, it'll be the next thing. So maybe those fresh eyes might create that next thing that creates the new revenue model for the company. I don't know if it's time for a new CEO yet, but I definitely think it's time for some new fresh set of
I'm
eyes.
not saying that Dorsey should take it, but like if a Elon or like an ambitious executive character like Elon that people trust, because I think the thing that we're leaving out is when brands lose trust, it's only a matter of time before they lose market share. So once the scandals began to roll out and happen continuously, it almost became unfashionable or uncool to continue to use Facebook. So if they had a leader that has trust with the people, trust amongst everyone in the banking sector, the hedge fund sector, right? I think it'd bring a lot more value to the company. And I think even the employee base would be more invigorated, because of course it's an intimidating place to work. The bar for excellence is really high. But I do think sometimes we've seen it even in, not to make a comparison, but like even in WWE, Vince got pushed out, but now because you have new executive leadership there, roles are changing, you're seeing some revitalization of the products and programming. And I think it may be time for him to step away and just go to an executive role or work on another project inside of the company and let someone else. Because sometimes as a business owner, we can all be too close to the business and not see where the emerging opportunities are. It may be time. But don't shut my page down. I love you guys. Dearly.
Very important. I feel that Meta is a very interesting company because on one hand, it has 3 of the top 10 apps in the world with WhatsApp, Facebook, and Instagram. That's extremely impressive. And on face value, it would look like a monopoly. But they also have a lot of challenges. And I look at investing, I look at a company kind of like a mountain. There's only 2 ways on a mountain. It's going up and it's going down. And you can still make a lot of money on the downward side, but you're on the downward side. IBM is still a viable company. Its stock hasn't done anything in 10 years. Yeah. But it's not like going bankrupt. It's still making money, but it's not innovative, it's not disruptive, and its stock hasn't done anything. So when you look at Facebook or Meta, I feel like it might be on that downward side because I don't see what else it has in its arsenal. I think that Meta is a stretch. And when you start to change your name and it's like a wrestler. When you start to do things that's out of character, it's like it's a reach. You don't see Apple changing their name. Yeah. They might change the logo, but the company is strong enough to just remain as Apple. You rebranded and you're going in the metaverse. It's a stretch because it's like, where else do you go for social media? TikTok has become a formidable opponent, and you couldn't purchase them. You have no more room to really grow on Facebook. You're actually losing daily usership. Yep. Instagram is great, but people are kind of even peeking out at Instagram. Yeah. TikTok, like I said, is coming. WhatsApp, I like WhatsApp, but they still have to kind of figure that out, how they're even going to grow that. It's good internationally, but domestically, a lot of people don't even use WhatsApp. Yeah. So when I look at Meta, I'm not really sure about the direction of the company, and I'm seeing a lot of things that's kind of weird. So one thing I learned about mountain climbing, Mount Everest, is that more people actually die on the way down than the way up. You would think that it would be the opposite, right? Because it's like on the way up is very dangerous. But the thing about it is, on the way up, you're focused. You're laser focused. You have a plan. Yeah. Nobody really has a plan to get down the mountain. Yeah. This goes into a retirement conversation as well, right? Like, it's not really a plan to get down the mountain, and you become a lot more careless when you're going down the mountain. So I say that to say we have to see how Facebook or Meta can maneuver, but I'm not bullish on their stock because I don't see a lot of upside, but I do see a lot of downside. And if they start to get even more careless, then they could potentially start spiraling out of control. And if TikTok is still is a formidable opponent, but it's still not strong enough.
Why?
Because it doesn't.
They've really won the war already.
TikTok doesn't have enough at its arsenal to really dismantle Facebook. They have enough. It's kind of like somebody poking at your side. Yeah. Like they're annoying. They're an annoying fighter, but Facebook is still strong enough to go the distance. They don't have the resources. They don't have the influence. They don't have the user base. Like Facebook has too much. But I say that to say anything can happen. If TikTok becomes a little stronger or adds a couple more elements, or maybe even a new company comes about that's really a formidable opponent, because once Instagram goes, that's going to pull. Even though Facebook has more users, Instagram is the key to Meta. So once Instagram becomes compromised for any reason, you're going to see the whole Meta empire start to crumble.
I feel like TikTok is the one company. There's been opponents before, but they're the one that has still been punching, right? At the right time, right? We saw what happened with Vine, right? Like we saw Facebook at the time, saw what Vine was doing. They said, all right, let's take those features. Then Snapchat came along, and they're like, well, they got filters. All right, let's take their features. But they haven't really been able to grasp.
They took the features.
They took it, but they haven't knocked them out, right? So they're still punching. And I'm going to use the hip-hop analogy, Ian, because it makes sense. It was like when 50 was unstoppable.
Yes.
Get Rich or Die Trying, he puts the masker out, and then there's this guy, Kanye West, right? He's making a new sound of music, and it's like, all right, we can beat him, until you got to go up against him, and you can't beat him. And then now that opens it up for more people to come into the game. Now Game can come after you. Like all these other artists can now come after you because they saw that you were weak at this one time. And so, like, are we at that point for Meta in terms of social media?
If we're going to follow that same analogy, it wasn't 50 Cent, when he fell apart, it wasn't the music that did it. It was the politics and things not going well amongst his partners and executives at Interscope. So the leadership story with Facebook, for those of you who remember, anybody remember the Facebook IPO? It was a little bit of a disaster, but leading up to it, especially for those of you that are advisors, you know, a lot of people on Wall Street have not been the biggest fan of Zuckerberg because of temperament, being rude, arrogance. So even some of the deals being blocked by the government, it doesn't have anything to do with the product itself. It's temperament, being rude. We've all dealt with people in business that may have been really talented, but maybe not the nicest person. And that has come back to bite him a little bit. And I think, of course, you know, losing some key executives has been a sign that things are going to change and they be on a downslide over the next 10 years if they don't right this ship very quickly. But I definitely don't think Meta or the metaverse is the answer to their problems at all. Trust is.
Metaverse is not the answer. It's really not. Let's talk about this maintainer situation.
Tony Montana.
So previously it was FANG, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google.
Mm-hmm.
That was the tech cartel.
Yes.
And we interviewed Mark Cuban, and he said the only two stocks that he's invested in was Microsoft and Netflix.
Yes.
So he had
Sure.
millions of dollars in Netflix.
Yeah. Yes, he does.
Got to call Mark and check.
Yeah, you got to
See
check
how
on
he's
him.
doing.
That was a few years ago. But all right. So now Microsoft, Apple, Tesla, Amazon, NVIDIA, and Google. So this is is this the new tech cartel?
Yes.
Definitely.
Yes.
It's interesting that when we used to say FANG, I used to think to myself, like, why is Microsoft not part of this?
Yeah.
Like, aren't they a better company than Netflix?
Now, but not when Ballmer was running it.
I mean, when the acronym came out, because the acronym I felt like was like
2012-ish, maybe?
Yeah, around that time. So, I mean, we're at the peak of it. But yeah, I mean, for the past, I'd say 5 to 7 years, Microsoft definitely should have been in the category.
Yeah.
Obviously, Netflix, we saw what happened during the pandemic, and it hit its all-time high. And now we saw it pull back, obviously, for reasons where, again, where's the revenue coming from? How are we going to generate revenue? Where are the new, fresh ideas? How are we going to get money? When are we going to stop licensing and getting our own content? All these issues that they have no answer for, plus streaming services have come in and taken over in that space. So yeah, Microsoft I felt was one of those that should have been in there already. NVIDIA, I mean, what can we say? What can we say?
Why is NVIDIA better than AMD or TSM? What makes NVIDIA the premier chip company, or is it?
I think two reasons. They serve, although the chips, theoretically, you can serve the same audiences. They serve a different audience, and I think the leadership is a lot better. There's a lot more stability in NVIDIA's leadership. I think I love AMD as well. I've had it since $3, but NVIDIA I think has a stronger leadership base. And then of course, if you're into gaming, when I got my computer system built, there was you have to go with NVIDIA. Yeah. So there's a couple competitive advantages that they have and a moat that they have that AMD doesn't.
Yeah, their moat is definitely in the AI and the graphic chips. All right, so they're ahead of the game when it comes to that. And so that's the number one reason, and part of the reason why now China's saying America's saying hey China, we don't want you, you're not allowed to sell it anymore. So NVIDIA's been in the lead for the past 2 to 3 years. AMD is a great company. I don't think it's like an and/or. It's is Apple a better company than Microsoft? You take them both, really. TSM is another one, but obviously that's another geopolitical issue, right? When we talk about TSM, obviously the number one producer of semiconductors that are independent. Samsung makes more, but they make them for themselves. They don't really make them to sell to other people. But they're all great companies, and they all have different purposes, right? So when we talk about AMD, we talk about NVIDIA, more of a gaming situation. TSM, you can see more, even NVIDIA, let's not even stop that, but the EV market too, which separates them as well. So they're inside of a lot of the EV vehicles, especially the ones in China. And TSM, obviously, you see more in electronics. So they all have different purposes. Yeah. All are great companies. I love them all. I own all 3 of them. But just when it talks about the premier, especially in AI and gaming and graphics, NVIDIA is number one. Yeah.
So as far as that acronym, I love it. I mean, my personal formula for retail, 2 technology stocks, 2 index funds. But on the tech side, I think that's a perfect lineup.
Okay. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about the energy crisis and Russian gas crisis. Can that cause a recession in Europe?
It's a tough subject. I hope that it doesn't. The only leverage that Russia has at the moment is natural gas, and I hope that it's not used to affect those that are in Europe and it doesn't spread. But I do think that if this isn't under control, I'm not trying to stay away from political events, but it's so tied closely to the stock market, I have to address it. But I don't think if we don't fix this in the next few months, it could lead to a recession for sure in 2023 for UK, and that would spread to us. So when I'm looking consistently at the market, ever since crude futures bottomed out at 0, we've been pushing to the upside like crazy. I would hate to see this affects us, but I truly think if we don't get this under control by October, it could lead to that in 2023.
Yeah, if Russia's exporting oil, and we're coming around that season where it's about to be the coldest months of the year in some of these countries in Europe. If we don't have the oil coming in, where are they getting it from, right? And so now you see crude oil going up. And so when prices go up like that, obviously we talked about inflation, but oil prices going up in countries that can't afford them to go up, you're looking at a crisis. And so we're talking about, obviously, October, November, December. These are coldest, January, February, the coldest months of the year when you need the commodity the most, and now you don't have it. Now what do you do as a country?
Plus inflation in the UK has been incredibly high. Food prices have gone up tremendously. Right. It could be a three-headed monster that could lead to devastation. I hope that it doesn't, though.
So how do we get more people into investing? And over the last couple of years, we've seen an influx of new investors. Some may say that we played a part in that.
Small part.
Slightly.
Small part. But how do we get more people into investing, into business, into financial literacy, and into these conversations that we're having on a daily basis?
I think Josh and Advisor Circle, everyone here, you guys are a big part of that. I think for the first time in history, like if you look 8 years ago, this would have been inside of a building, we would have been meeting in the hallway. Now we get beautiful beach.
Ugly carpets.
Yes, like I think making events look more like festivals or things that you will want to attend outside of work. Like if we can make work culture actually be fun, and also most importantly, just sharing with each other, here's what I did, here were my mistakes, here were my wins. Like I met two kids who were 25 in Brooklyn when I was at their fashion event in New York. Amazing event, by the way. Two kids from Brownsville. If you're familiar with New York, Brownsville is not like the epicenter of like financial literacy. They were both up $450,000 off a $50,000 investment, and they never traded. It was all long term. So there's a huge amount of people that are dying for this kind of information, and I think more events like this, more podcasts, listening to ours, what are your thoughts? Kudos to all the advisors here. Just sharing the information and having an honest conversation about, hey, here's my mistakes, here's what will help you win. Because honestly, especially for everyone here, whether people admit it or not, they want the information from you. But often wealth management, investing, being an advisor seems so intimidating to the average person. You're like a celebrity, they're almost afraid to speak to you. So if you give them one or two great pieces of advice, not only will you help them, but you'll help their family. Like I've had people come up to me and be like, hey, I got 15 family members to invest from watching your show. And it just started with a, hey, how are you doing? So I think doing events like this, just spreading information, sharing the wins, and telling them the losses and the downside of not investing, how devastating it can be to their lives, is the blueprint to get more people to do it.
Yeah, I think it starts with education, and that goes for everybody. I mean, everybody here has a part to play. Obviously, we have a part to play in it as well, but having education that's readily available and being open and receptive and being willing to share it at any moment, right? Like I said, as we were walking down, we had about 10 conversations, and people were just sharing information. This is a new time. Yes. This is a new time. Like these type of conversations weren't just being had by happenstance, right? I couldn't go to the barbershop and somebody would show me their portfolio. I couldn't go to the supermarket and somebody wanted to talk to me about an index fund that they invested in because they heard it. And so the fact that people are actually applying the information and sharing it, I mean, I think that's the best way to spread it. On top of them getting results. Every piece of advice that we've given has been just honest, right? To protect people from making drastic mistakes is the reason why we talk about long-term investing all the time. But the fact that we're sharing it and that they're actually applying it and seeing the application be executed and having tangible results from it, it changes the game. And so like you said, being readily available to share it, finding different pieces. I know, I listen to the compound, so like podcasts are important, shows are important, even articles are important. Yes. And they're becoming more available, and they're tangible, right? They're becoming more legible, right? So now people talk about financial literacy, and I've been saying it for the past couple months, but people are becoming more financially fluent, right? So like it's one thing to understand finance. It's another thing to understand it, apply it, and now speak fluently in finance. And so that's something I even had to learn, but I see more people are doing it. And so it starts with the education and people sharing what they've learned and their experiences. Because the best thing that we can do is tell people our mistakes,
yes,
right? Because if we tell them our mistakes, chances are they won't make the same ones. In fact, that'll have their trajectory a lot further than ours. And that's what it's all about.
Yeah, I feel like if you're in a room and you're constantly in rooms and you're talking to people and every single person in the room understands and knows what you're talking about, then you're in the wrong room. And you're doing yourself a tremendous disservice, because I feel like I was a financial advisor for 12 years. And I used to go to Park, my office is on Park Avenue. I had to go there, take the train. It was a whole thing. And what I realized in being in that space, going to conferences and going to different meetings, is that everybody was the same. Some people are, it's different levels, but everybody's the same as far as their profession. And they go on and they go to the golf range, and they go to the golf, tennis courts and all that stuff, but they're speaking with their peers. And it's like spreading a religion. Like, you just can't speak to the people that's already converted. Yeah. Any religion, whether it's Christianity, whether it's Islam, whatever, it was spread from converting unbelieving people and making them believe in whatever you believe, right? So I feel that financial literacy in the business space is at, it's in a tough spot right now in America. If you look at the average financial advisor, 60-year-old white man, they're dying, but there's not a lot of young people that's coming into the fray. Like I said, I actually was a financial advisor for over a decade, so I'm speaking from firsthand experience. So it's extremely important to spread the message of financial literacy and investing to people that you're not comfortable with, or people that you may not be receptive to the message, because it's not only good for the benefit of the country and the world, but it's also best practice as well. It's actually lucrative from a selfish standpoint, right? But it's like, a lot of times you're looking past people because they're not of the same understanding that you have, and it's only making the problem. We have a tremendous problem in this country with financial literacy. Like, it's a tremendous problem, and it's causing a strain on our economy. Yeah. It's part of the reason why we have 10% of the world's population and 25% of the world's prison population, because people aren't educated properly, and they're doing things and they're risking their freedom because they're trying to gain financially, where the same amount of money or even more can be made legally if it was explained to them or if it was educated to them. But that's not a threat on somebody else's neighborhood. Eventually, that's going to be a threat on your neighborhood as well. So we're all in this together, and it's extremely important for everybody that's an advisor or in this space to understand that, because it's cool to have cocktail hours with your peers, but that's not beneficial to society. You can make some money, but ultimately, if you're in this, you should actually be trying to benefit society. And like I said, that'll actually end up benefiting you.
Absolutely. And I know it may seem like a daunting task because everyone's incredibly busy, but now with social media, newsletter platforms, I'm sure you guys are familiar with, it's not that hard. Even if you create micro content, and honestly, for most advisors here, a lot of the information that may be not that important to you, to the average viewer or audience member, it may be life-changing information. Like, even me just recommending Vanguard index funds. Everyone here knows, great, invest in an ETF, Vanguard, something with low volatility, low drawdown. To the average person, most people that I talk to, they never knew that 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. It was like, what's drawdown? Mm-hmm. I'm like, okay, here's how much you could potentially lose, right? Here's what Vanguard is.
Exactly.
Here's BlackRock. Here's basic information that may be elementary to you, could potentially turn people. Like, I've had at least 70 people from scratch become millionaires that was retail investors for the first time in 2019 and 2020. So like, one tweet, one podcast interview. Josh has been on our show 3 times, some of the best episodes. And you wouldn't think that the personalities would mesh, but the audience loved it, and just sharing the right information. You can grow your business 3x, 5x, 10x in a few years by just giving people honest information that they want to hear.
Yes. Before we leave, let's talk about Web 3.0. Let's talk about crypto. Cryptocurrency. Where are we at right now? It's obviously been a very volatile year for crypto. A lot of people, once again, lost a lot of money in crypto. We have a lot of issues with crypto. Security. We have...
no one was saying that last year, though.
Yeah. So what's your thoughts on the current state of crypto?
But before you start, yeah. I'll just say this, right? It goes back to what we were talking about. Sometimes you got to go through some things.
Yes.
So 2017, we saw this happen, right? This is a shorter time span where we saw crypto be at $3,000 and watched it run up to $20,000.
Bitcoin.
Bitcoin, I'm sorry. Bitcoin ran up to $20,000, and then we watched it pull back.
Yeah.
Right down to 3,000. Then we saw it run up to 60,000.
Yep.
And so the pullback this time hasn't even been as far or as
drastic.
drastic as it was when it did that. But the people who were invested then, they have the experience of knowing, okay, it's a volatile asset.
Yeah.
This is what happens. There's a percentage that it pulls back. There's a gentleman who talks on Market Mondays that's always about the percentage that it pulls back after it hits its high. There's also a gentleman on Market Mondays who told us that it was going to get to $20,000.
When it was at 58,000.
And it was at 58,000. Yeah. And so going through some things, seeing things happen, having money invested, being in the game, it will teach you, right? So what lessons did we learn from that? All right, well, if I'm treating this as a long-term asset hold, then I'm not touching it anyway. Right, so when it ran up to 20, maybe I took some profit, but I left some in. I left my initial investment in. When it ran up to 60, I might have took some profit, but I left my initial investment in. We've seen it, and so you can create a strategic plan after you've been in the game. You had some skin in the game. Yeah, so go ahead.
I mean, I think crypto is in a place where it should be. If every other asset in the stock market is coming down, I mean, at the time when Bitcoin was at 58,000 and I said it was going to drop to 20, you would have thought that like an entire town wanted to like hang me up like I was a witch or something, but I was just trying to protect people from losing. And often, especially for the advisors, I want you to hear this, the truth that you give your clients, even though they may not want to hear it now, they'll thank you for it a year later. There are 4 or 5 people that I know that lost $2 or $3 million on crypto, buying at the highs and when it fell, but there's also 5 or 6 that I know that made millions waiting for it to be at the right price. The market is just reset, and all the smart money waited to get in at the right price. Those who were buying at the wrong prices got punished, but it also was a great lesson. And for me, I got caught in the Mt. Gox scandal. Anybody had money in Mt. Gox back in the day? So that taught me to have money in a safe institution. Because one day, I was a new investor, and I was like, okay, I'm getting emails about this. I put my money in. I went to the bank when Mt. Gox blew up. I'm like, hey, how do I get my money back? They're like, we at PNC can't help you. Went to Chase. Can't do anything. So make sure you're investing in a safe institution first.
There's no safe institutions in crypto.
That is a huge
problem. If you don't have full control over your coins, I'm speaking from firsthand experience because my Coinbase got hacked.
Yeah.
So if Coinbase isn't safe, nobody's safe. This is not theory. I went to Chase because my Coinbase got hacked, and I happened to know the regional director of Chase. So they call and they like, I'm a private client at Chase. So when they called, they said, he said, oh, let me guess, it's a Coinbase. They said 100 people this month, same exact problem. So it's not, when you have crypto security, there's no secure company.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm with you. There's no secure company, and that's why the education piece is part. So when we talk about hard wallet, soft wallet, once you have the asset, take it off the internet, right? But even that, right? Like we've seen people who have taken their assets and put them on nano ledgers, and then I forgot the code. Oh, I misplaced it. And so, it's safer to not have it on there, but there's risk to not having it on as well. Are you going to be mindful enough to remember your 10-word passcode? Are you going to remember where it is? Are you going to put it in a safety box? Like all these things that you have to think about, again, having a plan before you invest. So like that's a prime example. Like there really isn't a straight way. I had money in Binance. And then all of a sudden, Binance won't allow U.S. customers anymore, right? So I got to use the VPN just to get my money off. I had the knowledge to know to do that, but the average person is thinking like, what's a VPN? How do I do that? Like, what does that even stand for? And so, like the education before any investment is important. So like knowing these things, knowing the risk factors, knowing what institutions, knowing the safety protocols and the technology needed to have a safer investment is vitally important.
Yeah, for everyone here, whether you're an advisor, you're on the institutional side, I know the message of safety is not the sexiest one. Trust me, now they want to hear that message. Dogecoin died, Ethereum is sliding, Bitcoin is down. No matter how hard the journey is, please just keep preaching the truth to your client base. In 4 years, 5 years, they will thank you. Everyone who was big on all these exotic cryptocurrencies, you guys have gotten a lot more calls over the last 6 months, right? Asking you for guidance on what to do. So pick safety over sensationalism, invest for the long term, and that's really the long-term game. I know there are going to be players that come out, and Elon may send out a tweet and may send Solana to the moon. Your clients may want to get in. Just keep giving them the honest truth, because when they're drawing down 50%, 60%, not knowing how they're going to pay for their kids' college fund, they're going to thank you for making sure that you always told them the truth, even though it may not have paid off for you in the short term. In the long term, it will.
I think it's extremely important to have, the mindset for investing, and even for advisors to, preach that to their clients. Where the number one rule in investing is to buy low and sell high, but 90% of retail investors do the exact opposite.
Yeah.
They buy high and they sell low, and the reason they do that is because of FOMO. Like, right, well, you see Bitcoin at $3,000 and you're scared because it already lost so much value that you think it's going to go to zero. So you wait, and then it gets to 10,000, and then you kind of get a little antsy, and then it gets to 20,000, and you're starting to do a little bit more research, and then it gets to 60,000, and you feel like every single person in the world made $1 million, and you're the last person on earth to invest, and then you put your whole life savings into Bitcoin at $60,000, and then it goes down to 20,000, and you see that you lost 60% of your money, and everybody is screaming at you. You're about to get a divorce because you bankrupt the family, and you sell, and then it goes back up to 60, and this is a vicious cycle. It's the same thing that happens with Tesla stock, with Dogecoin, with anything.
Even Apple in 2008,
yeah,
2009.
Apple.
That was me.
It's the same cycle, and history repeats itself, and people keep doing the same thing. They're gonna continue to do it because no matter what you tell them, they don't have enough emotional intelligence and they don't have enough composure to actually wait it out. It's like fishing. You just want to rush. So as an advisor, I think it's extremely important to have that conversation with your clients and to really force them to be composed, to force them to be level-headed, to not have emotion, to not fall in love with a company, to not listen to the news, to not do everything. Because once you fall into those winds of emotion, you're only going to be in a very disruptive cycle of losing money continuously. You're going to continuously lose money. And then at that point, you're better off just going to Vegas. Because at least you get a couple free drinks.
They're definitely drinking after they lost 60% in Bitcoin.
Well,
It's liable to happen.
it might not be free, though.
That's true.
Vegas got a nice deal. You don't pay for parking. They'll comp your room if you lose enough money.
This is also true.
We could at least have a good weekend.
That's true.
But thank you guys for having us. We
Thank
fully
you guys so much.
appreciate it.